We've been talking about sequence of return risk. So let's make sure we're clear what sequence of return risk is and what it isn't. Sequence of return risk is not the risk that your withdrawal rate may exceed the growth rate of your retirement savings if the stock market underperforms. Sequence of return risk is the risk that even if your withdrawal rate stays below your growth rate, you still might run out of money because of a flawed or on-the-fly withdrawal strategy. An on-the-fly withdrawal strategy, the assumption that you can take withdrawals as the need arises from your portfolio without any more thought to it than that, is the single biggest reason people outlive their savings. You must have a well thought out withdrawal strategy to ensure that your retirement savings are retirement ready. So over the next 5 minutes, I want to go over a couple of well-known strategies that have been offered as solutions to sequence of return risk. These will be things I'm sure you've heard of before, so let's jump in. To start, let's talk about that word income and set a couple of parameters. Generally, we want our income to be two things, reliable and predictable. Now think about your paycheck when you were working. Did you know how often you were going to get a check, or did they just surprise you with it every once in a while? I mean, you knew when to expect a check. It was reliable. And did you pretty much know the amount of the check, or was that always a surprise? I mean, you knew the amount of the check, so from that standpoint, it was predictable. Paychecks are reliable and predictable. It's why our Social Security checks are so important to us. They're reliable and predictable like paychecks, and that's what allows us to plan and budget around them. So ideally, we want all of our income in retirement to be like a paycheck. That way we can plan and budget. So with that in mind, one possible solution is a bond ladder. Bonds pay a set rate of interest, which is important for two reasons. One, it's reliable. You know when to expect an interest payment. And two, it's predictable. You know how much you're going to get. It meets our criteria of reliable and predictable income. And you can easily calculate what you need to invest to get the reliable and predictable income you need. If you need $40,000 per year in income beyond your Social Security and bonds are paying 4%, you just divide $40,000 by 0.04 and you get $1 million. What that formula tells you is that if you invest $1 million in bonds that pay 4% per year, you'll receive $40,000 each year in reliable and predictable income. Easy, right? But $1 million is a lot. Now, not everyone needs $40,000 in income. That's just an example. You could cut the investment in half if you only needed half the income. But if you have most, if not all, of your money in one investment, the first drawback that comes to mind is there isn't any diversification. But there are two more serious drawbacks to a bond or fixed income ladder. And those drawbacks are inflation and interest rate volatility. Now, the good news about the $40,000 in bond income is that it'll always be $40,000 in income. The bad news about that $40,000 in bond income is that it will always be $40,000 in income. And over the course of the typical retirement, everything becomes more expensive because of inflation. But the biggest drawback of a bond ladder is interest rate volatility. The easiest way to explain that is by thinking of a teeter-totter. Interest rates and bond values move opposite each other like a teeter-totter. So when interest rates go down, like a teeter-totter, bond values go up. Conversely, when interest rates go up, like a teeter-totter, bond values go down. Now there's an easy explanation for why that happens. Just think in terms of supply and demand. Suppose you have a bond paying 2%. And everything else, CD at the bank, for example, is paying 1%. Which would you want? Your bond value would go up when interest rates went down because more people would want it. But let's say interest rates go from 1% to 3% over the next year. Now which do you want? The CD paying 3% or the bond paying 2%? And nobody wants the bond anymore. So when interest rates go up, bond values go down. Do you see the teeter-totter? But the Fed recently lowered interest rates to near zero because of the economic uncertainty of the times. Interest rates can only go one direction from here, and that's up. and that means bond values are certain to go down. That's why the famous investor and hedge fund manager Ray Dalio is on record as saying, "You'd be pretty crazy to hold bonds right now." Now, I don't think anyone foresaw what was going to happen with interest rates and bonds, so no one is going to recommend that strategy to you anytime soon. Instead, what most advisors will recommend these days is putting your money in a big bucket, so to speak. Some of it is in stocks and some of it is in bonds, and that eliminates the diversification problem. And the idea is that you just withdraw a percentage, like 4 or 5% of the portfolio each year. Now, sometimes the money you take out will be from interest, sometimes from dividends, and sometimes from capital gains. And as long as the markets cooperate, you'll be fine. But why do I say as long as the markets cooperate? Remember, we're taking systematic withdrawals now to support our income in retirement. And we saw that the storm clouds were withdrawals during down periods. Do the markets always cooperate? Are the markets always up? But we're always taking withdrawals, and inevitably we won't be able to avoid taking money during downturns. And if there are no dividends or interest or capital gains because the market is down when you withdraw money, if you still want the money, where does the money have to come from? But if you start drawing down your principal, what do you start being afraid of? Now, there is a possible solution to this problem. What a good financial advisor would tell you is the market is experiencing a downturn, but it's temporary. It'll bounce back. It always does. Just don't take any withdrawals for the next 3 to 6 months so we can ride this out, and then we can start taking money again. Well, what would have happened if your employer had said, "Hey, it's been a little slow lately, but things are going to pick up. They always do. Just don't expect a paycheck for the next 3 to 6 months while we ride this out, and then we'll start paying you again." I mean, what kind of pickle would most people be in? How many people could actually afford to do that? That's why you get this phenomenon of people withdrawing money and stumbling on the way down the retirement mountain. They have to take withdrawals no matter what because they need the money to live on. But if the sequence of returns doesn't fall exactly right, you're going to end up in big trouble. So again, we can ladder bonds to produce income, but with interest rates at zero, that's not even a possibility anymore. Or we could just put our money in a big bucket and withdraw a percentage of our money each year, but the markets would have to cooperate. And can we count on that in this new normal? The truth is that these kinds of plans could work, and that's why they're often recommended. You could, until recently, put all your money in bonds and get your income that way. You could put your money in a big bucket of mixed investments and just withdraw a percentage from the account and get your income that way. But in both of these scenarios, the sequence of returns has to be just right. Neither of those methods is guaranteed to work. And if you don't believe me, just go ask your financial advisor a simple question when he puts together one of these income plans for you. Just ask him, "Is this guaranteed to work?" And then sit back and see what he says. But there is a third way. And next time, I'll show you a middle ground that enables you to make withdrawals in a systematic way from both good and bad markets, without fear of crashing your portfolio and running out of money. Until next time, stay safe.